Hello everyone. Today I would like to introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Cindy Sanderson, who is Human Resources Business Partner to the North America Plant Breeding Organization, joined Monsanto in 2017, focusing on leadership and employee development and engagement, increasing organizational capability through human capital initiatives, and supporting change management initiative across the organization. Based in St. Louis with her family, Cindy has over 15 years human resources experience across the pharmaceutical, life science, and oil and refining industries. So let's begin.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. While I bring this presentation up, what I wanted to do was start off by having a conversation really about not only sharing my perspective and experience that I've gained throughout the years, but hopefully along the way, providing some insight as far as questions that I get from both new individuals coming out of academia, going into industry, and also experienced professionals that have been in industry for many years and have started to actually say maybe it's time for a change, maybe it's time for a transition onto a new company. And so how do I think about rebranding myself and how do I make that transition? So hopefully today will be a little bit of insight, a little bit of learning. I'm more than open taking questions through chat as we go along, and we'll look for the panelists to help me field those. Or as you go along, if you get the feeling that you want to know more about something, we can always pause and go a little bit deeper into it before we move on to the next one. So as I was saying, hopefully today be able to gain a little bit of experience and insight into the things that I've seen throughout my 15 career in human resources. As mentioned, I have graduated with a bachelor's in human resources management and quickly got into my profession more along the lines of executive recruitment and spent a few years there really kind of getting in deep and understanding what companies needed to hire for, the skills, knowledge, capabilities that they needed, and then went out to the market to find candidates that actually had that experience at various levels. After a few years, I actually joined Sigma-Aldrich, a big life science organization based here in St. Louis, and spent quite a few years actually supporting every single area of the business, from commercial to manufacturing to the corporate shared services organizations, and had the experience to dig in deep with that organization and really think about our university relations programs. Spent time working on how do we go about selecting candidates, not just from an interview process, but how do we gain additional knowledge and experience on that technical side and be able to place them appropriately within the organization for the best fit. So it's been a few years at Sigma-Aldrich, and then ultimately made a transition into the pharmaceutical space and in oil and refining industry. And I can tell you that every single industry out there offers something very different. They all kind of move at their own pace. They all have their own challenges. But as a technical expert, myself as a human resources professional, yourself and your, the career path that you choose to take on, at times you'll go in knowing a lot, and at times you'll go into a new role knowing very little. But it's ultimately how do you navigate that and leverage the people around you that will actually set you up for success, and we'll talk more about that today. So I did want to share, as mentioned, I work out of the St. Louis market. I do spend most of my time traveling the U.S. across the 30 research stations that my current organization has. I'm supporting our plant breeders, our research associates, and a lot of colleagues along the way. I do reside on the Illinois side of the river, so to say, for St. Louisians, with my family. And then because there's such a big focus, I always choose to share this in conversation because I think it's just naturally prone to the pace that academia and even industry is moving nowadays. The pace is very much quickened over the last decade or two as far as expectations, workload. There's a big focus right now for all employees in the organization that I work about recharging yourself. You spend your day working in meetings, focused on the research, whether at the bench or in the field. How do you actually give back to yourself? And so we call that recharging. And so for myself, bar none, the best way that I can recharge myself is actually watching sunsets and sunrises. That actually can give me a little bit more energy to manage through my day. So I'll move on. as I said, I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of individuals at various levels in the organization, all the way from managing collegiate recruitment up to managing our senior leaders and helping them rethink how their organizations are structured and the work that they do, especially from a research and development perspective. And the commonality that no matter what level, where you're at in your career, that all of those individuals have is that they have passion and they have expertise. And we want to bring it forward to be able to benefit an organization. But at the same time, with all the changes around us, as companies continue to contract and expand, depending upon what's going on within their market or what's going on within the organization, you work side by side with your peers day in and day out. You have your role and responsibilities that you're responsible for, and we often spend more time at work than we do at home with our friends and family. And so making sure that you ultimately find the best fit, both for you as an individual, for you within the culture that the organization has, and for you in the role that you choose to sit within today or in the future, making sure that all those things align, because again, how we spend our day is of course how we spend our lives. So for today, I thought I'd take us through the employment life cycle, kind of starting from as an applicant, what's the experience, what are the kind of the tips that I have to pass on to others as far as my knowledge as an applicant. We'll go through interview and offers. We'll go through onboarding into a new organization, and then ultimately wrap up towards how do you actually think about your career path? How do you actually think about your career development within a company to kind of give you that well-rounded exposure and experience into the insight? And so we'll hopefully spend a little bit of time on each one. I'll try not to delay us too much so we can make it all the way through, but still have time for questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. But as we go along, I do think that, ultimately the focus for me and in making sure some of the core understanding that you walk away with today is in the role that you sit today, and as a student, as someone completing their PhD, as someone looking for a job in industry, or someone that perhaps has even already kind of stepped into industry and to their first role or several roles that they've had, making sure that we walk away today with an understanding about, industry versus academia, and how do you make that transition, how do you make that jump, and kind of what are the difference between the two career paths that what can each offer, making sure that I make sure that it's outlined and clear that the way that you get selected for a role will be different depending upon if you're applying within academia or if you're applying within industry. Making sure that everyone understands that the scale, scope, size, and pace and culture will be very different if you work in academia or in industry. And then finally, the way that you succeed in your career, the way that you move on to different roles and responsibilities, and the way that reward and recognition will come your way will be very different depending upon if you work within academia or if you work within industry. And so I'll share some knowledge there as well as we go through the employment life cycle. So a lot of questions, a lot of time that I spend out on university campuses and with students, even with professors and their career service placement centers, it's always trying to distill down, is industry right for an individual? Academia has so much to offer, and often I find that people really can go deep in the true roots of research. Versus sometimes in industry, you often feel that you get additional responsibilities on top of the true research. How do you really figure out, is industry right for you? And so I can say that even in the different industries that I've sat, they're all in different places. It feels like pharmaceuticals maybe 20 years ago started to actually divest all their non-core assets and really kind of streamline their product portfolios. And obviously we've seen over the last few years that agriculture is looking at actually collapsing organizations, and from a competitive standpoint, how do they actually collapse down, if you will, and really kind of correlate their R&D pipelines, whether they're a seeds and traits company or they're a chemistry company. They're really thinking about how they manage their product portfolios. They're thinking about how do they get more market share, and is acquiring another company and gaining that market share part of their strategy. They're also thinking about what types of roles do we need to take us into the future of modern agriculture. And so as we think about industry and all those shifts and changes, at times it can feel a little bit daunting. And so making sure that you understand the strategy of a company, making sure that you understand what's going on in industry is very important, especially as you think about if you're currently underway with a job search. Together within agriculture, I think we're all looking for the exact same mission. It's how do we solve global issues around sustainability or food supply to developing countries or even within our local countries. But all working together within the industry, I think really kind of creates an excitement and a sense of pride for working in the agricultural space. When we think about the transformation and change that's going on within agriculture today, the scopes of roles will continue to change. And so when you think about industry, and I mentioned this before, every company is always constantly thinking about what roles don't exist today that we need in the future, and what roles exist today where we have a large workforce that maybe we don't need in the future, and how do we develop our workforce to be able to make a transition into doing something different. And help them from a change management perspective. And then finally, I think for industry, and is it right for you right now? I think that expectations of employees continue to increase. You know, when I think about how work in organizations sometimes is structured, sometimes you have very narrow scope of work, but it goes very deep. And sometimes you have very broad responsibilities. Sometimes the work that in other companies, 2 or 3 people would be responsible for, sitting across maybe different functions or different titles or different types of roles. And so really thinking about what's the level of expectation for the role that you would sit in, and then how is the responsibility and expectations increased for someone within that organization is a really great question to ask, regardless of what company you're joining. But tell me about, you know, how this has changed for employees over the last few years. Tell me what the general expectations are for all employees are great questions to ask as you think about looking at opportunities within industry. So the best place to start, and I think this is before you even really get into, you know, if I'm going to start my job search, where's the best place to start? It's actually for myself, and I've done this often throughout the years as I've thought about making a career change or two, and I've talked with others, where's the best place to start? I think it's actually around self-reflection on yourself and taking a step back and maybe even getting some perspective and feedback from others that you've had the opportunity to work through either through your studies or if you've been in a professional setting with your peers or colleagues that you've had. It's taking that step back and saying, do I have technical depth that an organization needs or that academia needs for maybe a specific area of research or a specific program that you're looking to apply for? Within academia, I find that often scientific credibility is a huge factor in being selected for an opportunity or for a role. Also, when I think about academia, the extensiveness and the inclusiveness of a program and of a peer group that you're working with, it is really much about how deep are you, what are the connections that you have, and how can you further develop the research in that space. And very much of it is often relationship-based. It's having those solid foundations of relationships to share and exchange information and knowledge really sets someone up for success on the academia side. On the industry side, I sometimes feel that maybe there's a slightly different take and approach when looking at candidates, especially from a human resources perspective in the chair that I sit today. Often when I look at candidates, it's really about, are the skills needed for the role apparent? You know, can I glean from their resume or their CV that you have that baseline knowledge that we need for someone to be successful in the role? And then can we develop the other small pieces that you do not have? So that technical depth isn't always overshadowing the other things that we look for in candidates. I think that making sure that you emphasize on how your achievements can be applied. So where have you had successes on certain projects or certain activities or events that you've been able to manage or be a part of? How have you taken these events and these reward and recognition moments within your life and showing how it can be applied within the company that you're applying for? And how is it relevant to the roles that you're looking at? And then finally, how do you, when you read through that job description, when you look at companies and really what they value, whether it's communication or leadership style or any type of core competency, like dealing with ambiguity or adaptability, if you will. It's how do you take that and how do you actually verbalize times when you've been able to overcome situations, challenges, or how do you actually exhibit that behavior, that competency? And then more importantly, how do you stand out from others? You know, if an organization or even academia is interviewing 20, 10, down to maybe 3 candidates for an open role or open roles, how do you actually stand out from others? So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how to think about positioning yourself in a different way. So once you've had time to actually reflect on who you are, the strengths and competencies that you have, and how you would be a good fit for a role or for a company or within industry, there's really kind of 3 core areas that I always spend my time on. And so one is making sure that you actually set time aside to focus if you're truly going to go in a job search. When I started my career 15 years ago, I remember actually interviewing a handful of people, and there was one person that stood out, and it was, I had asked why they had left their previous position, they were no longer employed, and why they wanted the role that I was offering them during the interview process. And the person had indicated that, I left my last position so I could really focus on my job search. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. Don't know if it's required to do or not, but now throughout my 15 years and even having to pursue job opportunities myself, I fully appreciate and understand looking for a job is a full-time role. And so making sure that if you're serious about your job search, regardless of what level or career path that you're on today, actually setting aside specific time to focus on your search is really important. And during that time, there's some core things that you really need to focus on. One is making sure that you're actually taking the time to really develop a core resume or CV, but at the same time, making sure that it's adaptable. Whether you're applying for maybe an entry-level role, or maybe you're stretching yourself a little bit further and you're applying for a role that maybe requires a little bit more experience, but you've got your fingers crossed for it, whatever that may be. It's making sure that you have different types of resumes to reflect the different types of roles that you want. If I was looking for an entry-level role, the skills and experience that I would outline would be much more applicable for the skills and experience that are required in that job description. And if I was applying for a role that maybe that was a bit of a stretch for me, in my resume or CV, I would actually try to add in a little bit more information to show the additional things that you've done to where you've got some relevant factors in there that show that you've got a little bit of experience in that space, but you've got the capability to be able to do it. I also think setting aside specific time to research organizations and the roles to ensure that they're a good fit. There's a world of information out there on Glassdoor, on Indeed, ratings, if you will, on organizations or applicant experiences, but also your network. And I know that previously in the last session, learning more about how to leverage LinkedIn as a tool. LinkedIn is a very powerful tool that was not as relevant 20 years ago as it is today, but making sure that you build out your network and you're actually, sending messages to those that work in those current organizations that you're looking at and connecting with them just to borrow a few minutes of their time to ask some questions as you either before you apply to know what really is valued at that company, or maybe helping you connect with the right person where that job opportunity sits. But making sure that you have specific time to focus on your job search is really by far one of the most critical factors in setting yourself up for success. At times, and I've done this myself, at times it's been midnight, it's the last thing, in the day, but I feel the need to go out and apply for a position or two that's out there. If you don't have that clear head, if you don't have your documents ready to go that are crisp and clear, relevant for the role, at times it feels like you submit them through into a black hole. And at times the recruiter and hiring manager can tell as they read through that maybe, this is a general resume that you're using with a lot of companies. And the candidates that stand out time and time again are the ones that you can tell have taken the time to really customize it and format it and personalize it to that company and for that opportunity. So I'll keep moving on. The next question is really, do you have the right tools? And so, if you don't, making sure that you find a mentor, whether it's someone with experience with job search themselves, someone in the human resources or job placement service industry, or maybe just individuals that have a great kind of perspective and an insight that they can provide as a peer, as a friend, to help guide you along the way. But making sure you have the right tools in place is going to be really important. So using those tools that I talked about, Indeed, Glassdoor, and your network are going to be really important. And then finally, are you prepared to talk about yourself? And so I have found, no matter, my 15 years in the company to employees that I've talked with that have been with the organization for 30 years, the time at which we have to talk about ourselves often is the most uncomfortable 10 minutes of time that you'll ever have. So you really need to practice, no matter where you sit in your career path today, whether you're emerging and looking for your first job, or you've got years in industry and all of a sudden you have to find yourself applying and interviewing for a new role internally within an organization or an outside organization. It's really making sure that you take time to create your personal value proposition. And so some people would say, okay, is a PVP or personal value proposition the same as an elevator pitch? And I would say it's actually a little bit different. Elevator speech is usually going to depend on who's in the elevator with you. If it's someone that you're trying to influence on a project, you're probably going to have a few different bullet points for that individual versus someone that you're actually wanting to convey your personal value proposition and why they should know you, why they should want to work with you is often a little bit different. And so in a PVP, I really think about 4 core areas. And the first one is making sure that people understand your strengths. Relevant to the job that you're looking for or relevant to the industry that you're working in, what are the strengths that you actually bring to the table? It could be very much on the technical side, and sometimes it could be very much on kind of that competency side, dealing with ambiguity, business acumen, the experiences that you've gained so far in the roles, internships, co-ops, or just your studies that you've had along the way. So making sure that you outline your strengths. At the same time, making sure people that are clear about what you're passionate about. And so when you think about your strengths, they may not always be your passion. When I think about my strengths, I'm always looked to a lot from an Excel, from a pivot table, from a VLOOKUP, from a system standpoint, but I'm not necessarily passionate about it. So while people come to me a lot, they're always looking for me to help them along the way. I don't want to spend my time there that often. So I'll help them out, but I don't want to be looked to as the subject matter expert, and that's the narrow career path, if you will, of stuff I want to do into the future. So making sure that your strengths and your passion kind of correlate, and that's a clear message there. The other 2 areas is really about your character and about your purpose. At the end of the day, when you think about your career path and the ultimate roles that you would like to sit in, making sure that that's part of how you talk about yourself as well, and that it actually supports the values and beliefs that you have. And so I'll stop right there, and just as a quick example, when I've talked with other individuals about creating a PVP, they often say, okay, what's yours? So I'll share it today. It does need a little bit of brushing up on, but I thought I'd give everyone kind of a jumping off point, especially if you're looking to create your own. And so for mine, it goes roughly about like this. So often we always want to refer to ourselves as name, title, how long you've been with the company. And a lot of companies, when you get into basic introductions, that's how they'll start. And you'll even notice that from time to time. My basic introduction would be Cindy Sanderson. I'm an HR business partner for North America Breeding. I've been with my current organization for a year. But it doesn't take me to where I want an audience to truly know me, or if I'm trying to influence a hiring manager or key stakeholders, what I want them to know about me. So how I would actually approach my PVP would be, I'm Cynthia Sanderson. I've got 15 years of human resources experience, and I've been with the company for 1 year now. I joined because I bring a lot of experience helping leaders think about organizational change and help develop their employees and leaders to navigate through that change. And I'm really passionate about delivering training that helps our workforce improve their leadership capability. And so making sure that, I, again, express a little bit about my passion, a little bit about my background, kind of my strengths, if you will, and express it in a way that it's heartfelt and you can truly feel that I believe in what I'm saying. Clear eye contact, that strong voice really help accelerate the message of what you're trying to communicate. So hopefully that helps you along the way, just it's from my experience with it. So let's keep going. So as you think about a job search, you've set aside time, you've created either a core CV or a core resume, you've adapted it depending upon the role that you are applying for. Some people have asked, do I create a cover letter? And I would say every company, every recruiter probably has a different answer around that. Where I'm at with it is a career or a cover letter really helps me understand someone and why they want to work in the organization and why they really want that role. So if you feel that it's not explicit in your resume or for the role that you're applying, or if it's not already known, I would actually create a cover letter and include that with your resume. I would say that cover letters often get read about 60 to 75% of the time, but not all the time. So wouldn't be surprised and wouldn't hold back if you wanted to share that information again during the interview process, just in case if they have not read it. Also for individuals that have a ton of experience that maybe are looking to do something different in their career, maybe join a new organization or take on a new role, maybe where they don't have a ton of experience, that cover letter actually is a great form and a short, concise, few sentence way for you to be able to explain why you want to make the jump and how, what skills do you have that are relevant for the role that you're applying for going forward. And so I would always leverage that cover letter to help explain the things that aren't relevant or clear cut within the resume for the role that you're looking to actually apply for and get. So moving on, so you've gone through, hopefully you've applied for a few roles along the way. I do know that often it feels like a black box. Your resume goes in, and for many candidates these days, they don't hear back. They sometimes say, did anyone look at my information? Did someone look at it? Was I considered or not? And I can say that living in a world where a system is driving the collection of information and looking in a world where sometimes there's more applicants than there are available roles, there's not always a great approach to be able to manage all those candidates. And so they'll go through, and sometimes after 10 days of posting, they'll grab the candidates that have applied and take them forward to consideration and not look back. So always make sure that as you're applying for roles, you're looking at the date that it was posted, reaching out if maybe it's been a while, just to even verify if the opportunity is still available within the company is always a great way to follow up. If you don't hear back, don't be discouraged. I would say continue to apply for roles, continue to express your interest in joining that organization. I wouldn't let one or two or even 3 or 4 applications that don't get a response go by before becoming a little bit disenchanted with the process or that company. Oftentimes I found that it's about timeliness. At times it's about what's going on within the company and maybe they've held off on filling the role for a bit of time, or maybe it's just that for whatever reason it fell through the cracks. So keep trying and keep moving forward. But let's say that you did get a call and you go through a phone screen process and you're actually preparing for an on-site interview. I've got a few questions along the way as you think about preparing for interview, and then finally kind of jumping quickly into offer. For the interview, it's making sure that you spend time, even a day or two before the interview, or maybe even before the phone interview, to refresh your memory about that company. Big companies, even small startup companies, have some type of career page, some type of company organizational website that can give you a glimpse into their organization, what their strategy is, and where their areas of research and focus is. Maybe give you some insight into what behaviors or what values do they expect of employees. And then going back and rereading that job description and kind of earmarking in that job description, what have you done? What kind of relevant experience do you have for what they're looking for? Or maybe somewhere around where they're outlining their mission or their strategy or their values that they look for from an employee standpoint. When have you been able to exhibit those? I think kind of taking and doing some due diligence into a company really helps set up the conversation well and gives you a little bit more insight than for other than those that don't spend that time doing it. It makes you look more prepared. Making sure that once you've done the research, understanding that as you go in and interview with a company, every single interview process will be different. I've noticed that some organizations out there are moving more along the lines of academia and actually going for scientific presentations. Coming in and starting off the tip top of your morning or afternoon with a scientific presentation or a presentation about your background and experience to a panel of interviewists is actually, I think, increasing, especially over the last 5 to 10 years within industry versus academia. It's been there for a while. I do think that it helps actually give everyone some common knowledge about the applicant, about the candidates, and it helps set up so the conversation can focus on other areas about your beliefs, about what you want from a career perspective. How does this opportunity align to what you're looking for? It helps shift the conversation in a different way than having to explain 4 times, about your degree that you've completed or your academic background, if you will. So, the presentations are actually growing in demand, I think, across organizations. Sometimes you'll meet with a panel of 3 to 4 individuals. Sometimes you'll meet one-on-one. But usually companies these days will use behavioral-based interviewing. So making sure that you've spent time as you read through that job description, you look down towards the bottom around qualifications, and it outlines what are those competencies that they look for in individuals. Is it attention to detail? Is it, is it, again, dealing with ambiguity? Is it organizational management? But looking at those words within the job description and saying, when have I done that? What example can I use? And then making some notes for yourself as you mentally prepare for that interview, whether it's one-on-one with an individual or with a panel, will hopefully set you up for success. A lot of companies are doing multiple rounds of interviews, whether you start off over the phone, you go in, on site to meet with a team or with individuals one-on-one. And then a lot of companies move to perhaps 2 or 3 rounds, whether they're, getting to know a candidate deeper. Often I think we've found ourselves in this world where we've brought candidates in, we've spent maybe 4 hours with them, and now we're ready to make an offer. And we're saying, wait a minute, is that enough time for someone to really make a career decision to join an organization? Or do we need to do another round of interviews to allow for that opportunity for them to come back and ask more questions, to really envision themselves working here, to make a more solid decision? And at the same time, have we dug deep enough to know, are they going to be a good fit within the team? Are they going to have a longer term career path here? Or are they really just looking at this role right here, right now? So I think the depth of interviews is definitely changing. And I also think the amount of rounds of interviews is definitely changing and will be different from company to company, no matter if you're looking at small startups, academia, or even industry. On the offer side, so let's say you make it all the way through the interview process, however many rounds they have, the offer package. And so a lot of people often have questions about what's negotiable, what's not, how do I start comparing if I have different opportunities from different companies all at the same time? Here's my recommendation to you. As you think about the offer, I've often talked with individuals and they're actually breaking out their Excel, workbook or calculator, and they're starting to actually do the math from the base salary that's offered to perhaps there's a bonus program that you're eligible for, to what's the monthly cost of benefits, medical, dental, vision, all of that, and then retirement savings. How much money is the company giving you towards your retirement savings account? And they're breaking it down from a mathematical standpoint, which is always good. It's always good to understand, what does that full package look like? Because often I can say that, that time off often outweighs that additional $10 that I have to pay for my medical copay at the end of each year when I just need to recharge myself. But as you go through and you start to compare across different opportunities, I would always say take a step back, because it's not always about the money. It's not always about the benefit programs, and it's not always about the immediate things that you'll get within the first year or two of employment. I often think that it's more about that long term, because that's everyone's ultimate goal. How can I find an opportunity? How can I be able to progress within an organization? How can I continue to keep those peers and colleagues that I've built relationships up with for years and years? How do I go about doing that? And so when you think about, it's not always about the money, it's often about, is this the right culture for me to work within? Do I believe what that company believes? Do I envision myself working within that team? Oftentimes I find candidates asking about, outside of the offer package, if you will, what about development? What type of resources do you have in place to develop me as either an entry-level person coming in or someone with experience that wants to continue to grow as a leader in the organization? And so what different development programs do you have to offer? And when are you eligible for those? Or how would someone be considered for that? I often think that it's outside of the dollar and benefit programs and whatnot. These additional questions are part of that offer negotiation, offer understanding process with the recruiter or the hiring manager that you're working with. also think by far the biggest area of emphasis that I can make today is always be transparent. I found that whether it's the recruiter, the hiring manager, they've been there themselves too as an applicant or as a candidate throughout their career. And so being transparent and saying, this is where I'm at in the interview process with another company. I have to make a decision by this Friday. Do you think that you would be able to make a decision on me by this Friday? It's a very fair conversation to have. I think more often than not, companies would rather know that you're being considered for other opportunities and you have a deadline to which you have to make a decision than to not know and you'll walk away as a candidate. So always being transparent about where you're at, what you have going on, or if there's any hard limitations for you as far as salary or location, or you have to make a decision on other offers that you have on the table. And so sharing that, I think, goes a long way and will actually benefit you in doing that. My final point on there is making sure that if you go in and you think about the offer, there's always going to be some give and take. Whether a company comes out with a strong package that really aligns to what you were looking for on the salary and perhaps paid time off or whatnot, or maybe there's some gaps there and you were expecting a little bit more, always going back in with an ask. But I would say be clear about what it is. To go back in saying, I'd like more of a base salary increase by 5,000, is there any way I can get an additional week's, paid time off? Or, I'm not able to relocate for 3 months. Really in your mind, having a prioritization of what you want to see and what's of the most importance, I think will help steer the conversation so that they can know where they can come back and make the best counter offer possible. Going in asking for all three without any clear prioritization, you often sometimes will get something back that wasn't necessarily aligned with what you were hoping for. So I think being clear on what's negotiable, what's not, and then also what your priorities are is very important. So let's say you make it through the offer process and you've accepted the offer and you're going to onboard into an organization. I will tell you that at times, no matter if you've got 10 or 20 years in the industry, and you can definitely attest to this today, when you join an organization, you always have a heightened sense of emotion. And even if you're coming out of academia and joining into a new organization, whether it's transitioning into another university or academic setting or research program or going into industry, I will say that it's sometimes a bumpy ride. But it's making sure that you don't react to that initial day, that initial first few weeks, or even the first few months. Your emotions and your psychological state is going to probably swing pretty widely. I can tell you at every single organization I've ever worked at, and kind of expect it to this day, that your workspace and laptop may not be ready. It's not to be said about the company. It's not to be said about the IT organization or the people that are responsible for it. There are just sometimes glitches internally with the processes that are set up that create for that. But I've seen where sometimes people are kind of a bit surprised by it, and sometimes they see it as a quick indicator of, did I make the right decision? I would say, don't let that distract you. I will say that at times as you onboard into a new organization, even moving from one department to a new department in a different area of the business, you're going to get frustrated with some aspects. I have found that even side-by-side departments working within the research and development function in the current company that I work at, they move at different paces. They communicate very differently. Expectations of how employees work together are very different. And so it's making sure that, while you will get frustrated with some aspects, it's knowing that in the long run, this opportunity gives you back something that you're ultimately wanting. And so making sure that you're able to navigate through those frustrations without getting stuck in it is really important. But use your peers, use your colleagues, use those trusted people around you to help vent, to help navigate and come up with different ideas to be able to do that. I also think that, it will be different than what you anticipated. I can remember my first job out of college going in, and there was a desk and there was a stack of papers literally this high, and they said, there's your resume, start calling and phone screening. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is onboarding. This is me acclimating into a new environment. And how do I make it through my first week here? And by the end of the week and making my way through that stack of resumes, different than what I expected, different than the initial first job duties that I expected out of it. But by the time that I got done with it, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Not only, being able to navigate my way through it on my own, but also the experience that I gained in that rapid fire environment that they threw me into as part of my integration into the company. And so making sure that knowing on the front side it's going to be different than what you expected, I think helps level set just in kind of set yourself up for success from a mind standpoint. I also think that there's some key factors that help support your success as you onboard into a new company. And so making sure that you quickly and very on establish relationships to leverage. This could be peers within the team, so just spending time to get to know them as individuals. Someone that, not just knows how to do the job and can train you or cross-train you, but actually spending time to make sure that you're leveraging the relationships in other areas. Find people that have common interests. Find people that maybe went to the same, university or part of the same program that you were part of, or finding individuals that have the same outside interest in the community or through activities, and making sure that you set aside time for that is going to be very important as you navigate and try to establish your base within the role that you sit in, the company that you sit in. Making sure that you set up both short-term and long-term goals is going to be very important. And I think a lot of companies are starting to expect this. A lot of them refer to it as part of your individual development plan or your departmental goals that you'll have as working in the industry. And so short-term goals could be easy as get to know, 5 different functions or 5 different areas of the business over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. It could be something as relevant as, spending time with 3 new leaders, 3 months in a row to go out and network and just get their perspective on what's going on within the company or around strategies or around work that's being done, or gaining some true advisors, if you will, along the way. And then maybe a little bit more long-term, it could be making sure that you're always kind of understanding what's truly the business strategy. What are different areas of business acumen that you can develop in, whether it's understanding more on the financial side, or how does this commercial sales process work? And then ultimately, how do I develop myself down the career path that I want, either that technical career path or that leadership track? And then finally, making sure that when you think about as you onboard into a company, that's not only, when I say onboarding, the first week, getting through, benefits enrollment or getting your IT systems and workspace set up, but it's actually getting in and understanding the department, the work you're responsible for. That 30% role onboarding is very much focused around that. So making sure that if you don't have someone great that is cross-training you or getting you up to speed in the role that you sit, find more people that can help you along the way, because 30% of your onboarding is really kind of setting yourself up for success in that regard. But don't forget about the other 70% of that onboarding experience that you need from a company perspective. How do you get to know what's acceptable and what's not from a behavior standpoint? How do you find out, where do you go to find out communication updates, and how we communicate internally? Is it, what's acceptable? How do you figure out, from a work-life balance, as you kind of look around at 5 p.m. on a Friday, is it okay to go or not? And how do you navigate that? It's making sure that you spend the time earlier on, kind of working your way through company onboarding, if you will, and not losing track of that. Or else sometimes you fall into the same sink as maybe the 1 or 2 individuals that you tend to spend most of your time with, versus really trying to understand who is the company, and how does it operate and what's expected of me. So that's a little bit of a few thoughts around, thinking about onboarding once you've made the decision and have moved into a role, joining a new organization. But really, the question really turns more about long-term. So you've made the decision to accept an offer and move into a new organization or entity. And how do you make sure that you're really thinking about it from a long-term perspective? And so I can tell you, here's some of the biggest differences that I've seen even when it comes to industry and academia, and both have very much positives in my mind. But when I think about industry and performance, performance is definitely measured differently than it is in academia. And when I say that, it is within industry, there's usually 3 to 5 year strategies that the company is focused on. And all the functions, finance to commercial to research and development, really have to develop their departmental goals, and individuals have to develop their individual goals around those strategies to help support the organization and what they're trying to accomplish. Often your performance is measured off of that. And so the work that you did throughout the year, not just the day job of the work that you have to do, but how did you really help, what work helped deliver against that strategy is really where performance is really critically evaluated at in a lot of organizations. And oftentimes that will drive the recognition and rewards program. How much do you get from a compensation increase each year? Where does your annual bonus program pay out at? And so I think performance is measured much differently in industry versus academia based upon the performance. And it's not just what you delivered, it's how you delivered it. Do you have a great reputation? Do people enjoy working with you? Do you exhibit the competencies and behaviors that we would expect of employees? And that all goes into how performance is measured within a role within industry. I do think that your contributions is often seen part as a larger effort. I've got friends and family that have worked within academia for years, and sometimes it's, the epitome is really that research and the depth of the research and the publications and the efforts, and whether it's sent into the public domain or it's it's capitalized and moved into further research more. My experience has been in pharmaceutical space of being able to develop a clinical program and actually take a product to the market to solve an unmet medical need. Those are very much capstones, if you will. I think year to year, your contributions, it's always seen part of a larger effort within industry. And so how are we all working together to make this shift, move this huge monster, if you will, within industry to solve for sustainable agriculture, to solve for and implement modern technologies within agriculture and whatnot. So it's making sure that sometimes you won't feel that immediate punch with the work that you do, because outside of the small wins, but knowing that it all kind of culminates over a period of time through a lot of efforts of a lot of individuals. That third point, your relationships and networks honestly will be your biggest value creation. And when I say value creation, it is as you come into an organization and you establish your roots, it is very much, those are the people that you are going to build relationships with they will help set you up for success. But as you continue on in your career, at certain points in time, you're going to have the opportunity to give back to others. And so always keeping your eyes out for others and making sure when you're ready and you're at that point to be able to pass on your knowledge and establish relationships with maybe new employees coming into the organization or moving into the team, making sure that you have the opportunity to do so is really important. But by far, by none, as you come into a new company, don't fall into a silo. Don't try to navigate it on your own. You're going to rely on people around you. And a lot of people will be very open and honest that that's what you need to do. And the final piece is your development plan. Your development plan is really going to be key to ensuring that you always have clear line of sight about what you're focusing on, making sure that your leader and that the leaders around you across the different functions understand your passion, your interest, your strengths, and ultimately what different types of opportunities you're looking for as you manage your career within the company. Sharing that message, whether it's part of your goal setting or mid-year or year-end conversation that occurs within industry, or sharing it with mentors where you've established a relationship either through a formal mentoring program that companies offer, or maybe they have very much informal relationships from a mentoring standpoint, but making sure that you share that message and that each year you identify 1 to 2 areas, both short-term and long-term, that you want to work on from a development standpoint to give back to yourself. Because when you think about, even if you're only giving yourself 1 hour every 3 months, that's still less than 2% of your time throughout your career that you actually give back to yourself. So don't ever lose sight of that as you navigate through your career path. And so the final things when I think about career path, I've stated a few of these along the way, but really kind of establishing as you go throughout the years, What is the legacy that you want to leave? And make sure that the work that you do, the behaviors that you exhibit, this reputation that you build within the business really reflects the legacy that you want to leave with others. And making sure that you're vocal about that as well, and how you articulate your contributions and the value that you have. And making sure that the people that you work with, you want to surround yourself with. By far, there's two sayings in HR, employees don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. Sometimes those leaders just aren't the best leaders that they want to be working for. And the other saying is that employees have two decisions. They have decision to either stay and retain and continue on their journey, or they can choose, the grass is greener on the other side. And I can say it's not always the case through my experiences and working for different organizations, but every single time that I saw it, and have left an organization, it is the people that have kept me there. It is the people that really make up my day. So making sure that if you look to join a new company, join a new team, that it's really about surrounding yourself with people that you can see yourself working with. So I know we have only about 5 minutes, so quickly I'll wrap up in summary. Don't know if there's any questions, if so, start to get those logged if you have any. But making sure, as I said, taking time on the front side of your job search to really dig into the tools, resources, information that is out there in the World Wide Web at your fingertips, and starting there. Making sure that you look for the best opportunity, not just the money. Is also really key when you think about job search. And also spending time on yourself and development throughout your career is by far, not that often have I found leaders that are very much 100% focused on making sure that they develop others 24/7. It's kind of, oftentimes it's in pockets, that if you go into it intentionally with yourself, that focus on yourself and maintain that focus, it will help you accelerate your career because your path is always clear. You always have line of sight on what you're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop. I'll pause. I don't know if there's any questions on the line or through chat.
Yes, Cindy, we have a question. Can you give an example of academic experience that can be used in industry PVP writing? Yes, I can. So without knowing the specific area of research or whatnot, oftentimes what I have found is that how do you make that conveying of what you can bring to industry, whether it's a very deep technical research project that you've worked on as part of your studies, or maybe it's the teams that you've worked with or the results that you've accomplished. So let me give you a specific example. Oftentimes, I think coming out of academia, we always want to go that technical path. And at times you're applying for roles that don't have that technical focus. Maybe it's on something completely different. Maybe your path was on wheat and now you're applying for a role over in soy or corn. I would always go back to how did you collaborate? How did you communicate? How did you, what impact did that research have on what you were trying to accomplish? So from a PVP standpoint, I wouldn't go so deep with the technical part of it. I would, as an example, high level, real quickly in less than a minute, I would say that, as part of my research studies over a period of 2 years, I was able to work on, a project on haploid research, wheat research. We were able to actually take that and work it towards, delivering on the project in half the amount of time. But along the way, I was able to bring in individuals from industry, from academia, and from, different organizations and affiliations to elevate the amount of funding and research that we received for that. I was able to actually shift thinking in the current structure of that area of research at the time. So it's how did you bring people along? How did you communicate? How did you collaborate? It's those behaviors that we would look for from an employee standpoint, not necessarily the technical depth of the focus. I don't know if that helps or not. Thank you. Next question, what is the best way to find out about company culture? Company culture, the most honest feedback that I ever get is by connecting with people that work there. And so whether on LinkedIn you see someone that's two people away from you and you ask your friend to connect you with that person, I have found that in industry, people will make the time to answer questions that candidates have.
or that a referral has. And so even finding someone that can connect you with someone that works there, maybe in a similar area, or asking someone, who do I contact to connect with them? But going straight to that person and saying, I'm looking at an opportunity in the company. I'm really trying to figure out if it's the right fit for me. Can you tell me about the culture? What is it like working there? What are the things that employees love? What are the things that employees sometimes have challenges with? What kind of change are you going through right now? And do you think that, things are, trending up, or are they trending down? But go for those heavy questions, and usually word of mouth is best. I have found that Glassdoor, Indeed, those ratings sometimes just aren't relevant. I think sometimes employees use it, honestly, as a venting board versus getting that balanced approach to feedback. So look for those referrals and look for that network.
Thank you. Next question, when writing industry resumes, should we not describe our research, but instead focus on translatable skills?
I believe so. And the reason why I said that, you can always have two different types of resumes. Apply with, and maybe even attach both, have a resume that really talks about your academic program, talks about maybe any internships, co-ops, or previous industry experience or previous work experience that you have, any organizations, and you know the structure of a resume versus a CV. If not, spend the time to look at the differences between the two. Submit both. The recruiters, often I have found working in human resources and talent acquisition, don't understand the depth of the information in the CV. That resume and taking away that technical part of it often helps them truly understand if someone got the baseline experience. Do they have the academic program we were looking for? Do they have some of the core competencies, if you will, that we're looking for from an employee standpoint? Because they just sometimes don't understand the publications. They don't understand the research that you've done. So I would have both. And then as you talk with hiring managers or you come in for an interview, bring that CV with you, because you're going to meet with a community that understands it and they're going to want to see it.
Thank you so much. I think our time is up, but that was really, really helpful. So really appreciate it, Cindy. Thank you so much for your time to do this.
No problem. All right. If anyone's out there would like to connect with me on LinkedIn just to expand your network, feel free to do so. I'd be more than happy always to give any additional insight or career coaching along the way.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
All right. No problem. Thanks.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.